So let's start with the overview. Type 7 is the enthusiast, the adventurer, the generalist. I describe these as the rose-colored lenses of the Enneagram. These are people who can be trapped in sunshine. They have a really easy time imagining what could go right. They have a really difficult time imagining what could go wrong. So their habit of attention leans into the positive, the new, the exciting, and moves away from the negative. This is somebody who has this kind of internal sense of narrative. It's an instinct, they didn't create it, but it's this idea that happiness is right around the corner. I don't have it now. I'm not as happy as I could be, but I'm about to be. There's a time in the future that I'm going to be. It's right around the corner. It's something that I've got to go get for myself. And it's probably something I haven't tried before. So these are people who are really fueled by trying new experiences. Anything that's new, that's shiny, that's kind of something they haven't done is very, very appealing to type 7s. This is somebody, so 7s have what's called the 7 reframe. If something negative happens to a type 7, like for example, they get fired from their job, they will briefly be able to acknowledge, yes, I got fired from my job, that's bad. But their mind will automatically reframe it and they will quickly move to, that was bad, but actually, maybe that was a blessing in disguise because look at all the free time I have now. I didn't like that job anyway. Think of all the new opportunities that are open to me now. So they have this way of doing mental gymnastics to convince themselves that the bad thing is actually a good thing. And that is because it's really difficult for type 7s to process negative emotion. A lot of highly aware type 7s will say, I kind of have a sense if I start feeling bad, I might never stop. So I better never let myself feel bad. They move really quickly. They move really hard to not let themselves get trapped in a set of negative emotions. That's challenging for them. They have a fixation on planning. So 7s love to plan. They have a lot of their mental thoughts. If you were to look in the mind of a 7, a lot of it is future planning. So 7s tend to have very, very full schedules, usually with things that they like to do. They'll make sure to layer those things in. Downtime, unscheduled time can feel kind of anxiety provoking or at least uncomfortable for a lot of type 7s. So most 7s have a fairly full schedule. The rest of us experience them as really high energy. It almost seems like, how do these people have enough energy to keep going and going and going? 7s do, they have a lot of energy. So that's part of what is happening there. They have fear of missing out. So part of what keeps them kind of motivated to keep trying is this idea that if I don't go to that thing, maybe that was that most amazing event where I was going to meet this most amazing person that was going to give me that secret, that thing that was going to make me so happy. So they really are driven to kind of be out trying lots and lots of things. 7s are not great with rules. They are not great with limitations. They like a lot of personal freedom. So 7s tend not to be hierarchical. If a 7 is the boss, for example, they're not going to be that strict, I'm the boss, you're my direct report. They try to equalize things. They also don't like having a boss. And a lot of this is around these values of personal freedom. So 7s want to have lots and lots of space to be able to explore whatever it is that is interesting to them. So they try to equalize as much as possible. That's something that you will often see in type 7s. The 7 mind is very interesting. It has something called lateral thinking. So 7s are really good at thinking outside the box, at brainstorming, at making kind of unique connections, because where other types of minds might be more kind of linear in their thinking, a 7 is not like that. They don't have these boundaries. They can just connect things that the rest of us are like, how did that happen? But the 7 will see, well, you know, I know how to do yoga. I know how to do stand-up paddleboard. We'll put stand-up paddleboard yoga together and we'll launch a new whatever sport. And 7s kind of can see it and they'll try it. They're very experimental. So a lot of brainstorming. 7s are often brought in for brainstorming and they're great at that. The gifts of the type, what are they really good at? 7s are great at gratitude. They kind of own that space. It is when 7s can get their anxiety to relax, they actually feel a really, really deep gratitude for everything that the world has to offer. And it's really real. And what's nice about that is when sevens reach that level, they can share it with the rest of us. So during this whole COVID time, the sevens are helping a lot because they'll take that little 1% of brightness and expand it and really be able to focus on it and talk about it. And for them, that's very large in their mind. So gratitude is something that they're really, really good at. Uplifting, and again, this out of the box kind of lateral thinking. So that's part of the gifts of the seven. The growth path. Sevens grow when they move from what's called gluttony to sobriety. I don't necessarily call it sobriety, I call it discernment. And when I say gluttony, I don't mean gluttony in terms of eating and drinking too much. It's a gluttony for experience. So sevens will actually get confused in their mind about what's good for them and what's just new. For a seven, and particularly a seven who's kind of working on themselves, it's very unclear because it all seems really exciting to a seven. Where they grow is where they kind of start to slow that down and they start to really sit with this idea that something that's new is not necessarily amazing. And there are differences. There are things that are better for me, that are better uses of my time. When they start to focus and slow down and find what really makes them happy, that's when they do well. And the true growth path is when they get to enough discernment where they can stay focused and they can actually complete things, because sevens are sort of famous for starting something and then suddenly getting distracted. And what happens actually in the mind of a seven, if you could get inside, is they start down a path, they're really enthusiastic, and then it starts to get difficult. And the seven doesn't feel like they're leaving the thing that they're on, they just feel like something better came along. And so they're shifting to the new thing. When they can start to drop that and actually stay focused and move through that negative phase or stage or place, move through the negativity and come out kind of still focused, that's when they're really growing. So that's the very high level overview. And then as rest of you, for those of you who are new, I break it down into 6 different facets. So we go through all the 6 facets. Facet number 1 is the overview. Facet number 2 is the center. So type 7 is in the head center, the mental center. And this means that they first experience the world through their mind. Something happens and they have a mental exercise. How do I figure this out? What just happened? So this is a head type that is trying to work out whatever happened. And the sensitive issue that is driving a lot of the behavior is anxiety. And when I do typing interviews and I talk to sevens who aren't aware, they just found out that they're a 7 and they're not quite that aware of their behavior, they often will say, I don't think I have that. I don't feel anxious. And I know when I first got to the Enneagram, I'm a 7, I didn't feel anxious either. But what I felt was highly, highly energized and kind of nervous. So that manic behavior is actually being driven by anxiety. And it's kind of this subconscious idea that it's hard to hit a moving target. So sevens stay on the move as a way of avoiding anxiety. Anxiety comes up when sevens slow down. And this is part of what keeps sevens really energized and really out there. For them to stay home alone, no plans, no one coming over, no external stimuli. If they haven't worked on themselves a lot, that can be pretty anxiety provoking, actually, at the beginning at least. So they're in the head center and working with anxiety, although they are the one who under expresses anxiety. They don't feel it necessarily that much because they're kind of moving away from it. The wings. So you are your type, but you are influenced by one of the numbers next to you. So you are either a 7 with a 6 wing or a 7 with an 8 wing. The 7 with the 6 wing, the word they use is the entertainer. So this is someone who still has that habit of attention. What could be fun? What could be new? What could be exciting? I don't want to feel bad. But this is someone who's a little bit more relationship oriented, who's a little bit more insecure. And I mean that in a good way. 7s are very self-referencing. They're an assertive type that go after what they want. A 7 with the 6 wing, that's softened a little bit because they are aware, or at least somewhat aware, of how their actions might be impacting other people. So they're a little bit more insecure, and that makes them a little bit more careful, a little bit more filtered with their behavior. This is somebody who might be more openly anxious, so they can feel a little bit of that anxiety, and sometimes they can express it. And this tends to be someone who is fairly loyal. So that's the entertainer, the 7 with the 6 wing. The 7 with the 8 wing, this is the realist. So again, someone who's still got the 7 habit of attention, wants something new, wants to try things, positive thinking, But this is someone who is bold, who is direct, who is assertive, who big energy. This is the adventure. This is the person who's probably trying the extreme sports. They love all of that. This is somebody who's got a big energy. They do have an element of realism. So this is someone who can be a little bit more grounded, a little bit more realistic about, I could do this, but I can't do that, kind of just knowing limitations a little bit better. And this is someone who often has a protective element of the people in their lives. So 7 all the way, but feeling a little bit aware of who are my people? Are my people okay? Do I need to do anything for my people? That can often be going on with a 7 with an 8 wing. So those are the wings. And just as a reminder, while you lean more heavily into one wing, you have access to both. And there is the theory in the Enneagram that you start off with one dominant wing, and in the second half of your life, the other wing starts to express itself more. So if you started your life as a 7 with an 8 wing, you might start to feel the 6 wing more as you kind of reach the midway point and beyond in your life. So just to keep that in mind. The subtypes. So the 3 subtypes in type 7, self-preservation, social and sexual, intimate, one-on-one. The self-preservation subtype is called the keeper of the castle. And I just want to emphasize it's keeper of the castle, not king of the castle, because again, 7s don't like hierarchy. 7s don't want to be the king or the queen of the castle. They're not interested in that. They want to be the keeper of the castle. So this is somebody who looks at, they want lots of possibility and opportunity, and they look at that through the lens of relationships. I'm going to have lots of like-minded people surrounding me, my gang, my people, and I'm going to kind of find my way to opportunity through all of that. So these are people who are the master connectors. They are influencers. They are the ones, you've got a problem, you call your self-preservation 7, they've got 3 other people for you to call, they're going to line it up. This is someone who tends to be pretty good at business. They're good at thinking that way. They're practical, they're earthy, they're gritty. This is someone who can be a little bit transactional. So sometimes without even realizing it, they think I'll become friends with this person because if they're in our circle, they give us access to this other thing. And it's not that they're being manipulative. It's just something that kind of is going on sometimes in the background of the psychology. So they can be very good at business, very good at networking. This is the least commitment phobic of the 7. So this is a 7 that might not have such a hard time committing because they see this relationship as giving them more options. They don't see it as closing off. They see it as opening up. So they're more able to actually just easily commit in a romantic or intimate relationship. The social subtype, the word that they use is sacrifice. This is the counter type. This is the 7 that doesn't always look like a 7. And who does it look like? It sometimes can look like a type 2. So this is a 7 who is still self-referencing. They want what they want. They want to have fun. They want to have new experiences. But the psychology says, wait a minute, you want all that. It's super clear, but why don't you try to control that for the greater good? So this is someone who can be self-sacrificing. This is somebody who might put the needs of other people before their own. This is someone who might be behind a social cause. This might be someone who's very supportive in their family environment. But the one key difference between a 2 and a social 7 is the social 7 is very, very aware of what they're doing. They know I would like to do that and I choose not to. And so they've still got this drive for positive thinking to get what they want, all of that. They're just deciding not to. One thing that's been observed in the Enneagram community is a lot of vegans are actually social 7s. And it's this idea, I would like to eat everything, but the right thing to do would be to not do that. And so I won't. And so there's kind of this awareness in a way that they control themselves. This is someone who can be very idealistic. This can be somebody who seeks the admiration of other people more than the other 2 subtypes. The other 2 subtypes aren't very focused on what other people think of them. This is someone who wants to be kind of admired because again, they are sacrificing. And what this 7 has to be a little bit careful of is sometimes subconsciously, they will create a hierarchy of virtue, putting themselves at the top. So this is a 7 that has, again, got their whole thing going on, but they're giving up what they want and then kind of taking it back by putting themselves at the top of this hierarchy of virtue. So it doesn't happen all the time, but it's something that can be in the background of the psychology. And then finally, the intimate subtype, the one-on-one, fascination or suggestibility is the words that are used. This is somebody who honestly thinks the world is way more awesome than it is. So this is the person who literally has almost magical thinking. They are trapped in sunshine, but in such a way that it feels completely real to them. And they have the words fascination and suggestibility because they are easily fascinated by things. Small things can get really magical for them. And they can suggest this to other people because they believe it so much. They bring everybody else along for the ride. These are people who tend to be quite charismatic, and they can really lift the spirit because they're like, that was amazing. And to them, it truly was amazing, even though maybe objectively it was kind of average. So there's a way where the suggestibility runs both ways. They can have things suggested to them, and they can also suggest things out. This is somebody who is described as being the least grounded of the subtypes. This is someone whose head is in the clouds. They're very interested in kind of otherworldly things. So the metaphysical, the larger questions of life, philosophical thing, that is more interesting to this type. The world itself, the grounded world, it just has a little bit less appeal. So that can be going on. Every now and then, this 7 will get confused with a 4. They will, because the magical thinking and the idea that there's a lot of a very rich internal world going on is the same with both. But this 7 continues to be quite positive. They're thinking the world is a great place and really having a good experience in it, whereas a 4 might be feeling a little bit darker about that same situation. So those are the subtypes. Facet number 5, the stress or contraction point and the security or expansion point. So when 7s are under stress, when they are contracting, when they are feeling pressed, they go to type 1. So 7s tend to be fun loving. They want to have a good time. They want to try new things. But if you put them in a stressed environment, they suddenly become very perfectionistic, very rigid, almost school marmish, correcting other people, correcting themselves, staying quite rigid and upright. And it can be a surprise. So some 7s will say, I kind of have a dual life. If you see me at work, I'm completely rigid. And then after work, I'm party girl out doing whatever. So that can sometimes be going on. The security point, expansion points, when 7s start to relax, when they're feeling really at ease, when they're in an expansive state, they go to type 5. So type 5 is the investigator, the thinker. So the 7 who's usually running around trying lots of things suddenly doesn't feel that drive anymore. They relax, they focus, they feel more comfortable staying at home. They want to really get deep into things. They don't need all the external stimuli, and they might even get to the point where they don't want the external stimuli because they find it distracting. So this is what it looks like when a type 7 starts to relax and kind of feel that expansive energy around them. And then the final facet that I talk about is the levels of awareness. So the Enneagram gives us 9 very specific levels of awareness. We are always shooting for the top. We are usually operating someplace in the middle. And of course, what we want to try not to be acting out is the low levels of awareness. And you can have 2 7s who are both 7s, same subtype, same wing, from the same country, raised the same way even, who are at different levels of awareness, who are going to have radically different behaviors. So this matters a lot. Just to take a minute, I always say, if we could be in a world where we were all operating at those really high levels of awareness, it would be very difficult for us to know what anybody's type was. Because when you're at that very high level of awareness, you are no longer acting out your habit of fixation. You still think that way, but you do not act it out anymore. You do not feel that intensity. It feels completely different. Instead, we would be operating in a world where everyone was working from a place of deep compassion. So that's what we're always going for. So what does the deeply compassionate 7 look like? They look focused, they look accomplished, they look grateful. And when I say grateful, it's from the heart, awe-inspiring gratitude. They really 7s own gratitude. This is something that just comes easily to them. They would be enthusiastic. They still have that zest for life, but it's in a focused way. They can access the whole emotional spectrum. So if you come to this 7 and say, I am feeling horrible, they're not going to tell you it's going to be okay. They're going to say, let's sit and talk about that. They can hold negative emotion, other people's and their own. They will still be self-referencing. Sevens are self-referencing. They are a self-referencing type, but they will manage that knowing that they are acting from a place with higher value. They're going to have a higher calling, higher text, higher context for things. So it's not me first. It's, okay, I know what I want, but let me look at, is that still working in kind of the name of this larger calling that I'm working towards? So they balance it. They're still self-referencing, but they're not acting it out quite as much. That's the highest level. The mid-level. So someone who's excitable, who's probably scattered, who jumps from thing to thing, who's curious, who's joyful, who is manic, who's unfiltered. Sevens talk quickly. So I should mention this. Sevens interrupt as a way of, to a seven, interrupting is almost like active listening, because sevens are trying to communicate enthusiasm, and that would involve interrupting. And so when a seven interrupts you, while it is not, active listening, in a seven's mind, it kind of is, because this is their way of like supporting you and saying, yes, that was great. Like, let me share more or whatever. So that can be going on. And you would certainly see a lot of this interrupting going on in the mid-levels. They lose their restraint. So they just kind of are, they can be too much. They're very joyful. So it's kind of that balance. This is that big energy person that tires some of the other types out. And then low, what does it look like when a seven is trapped in their fixation? They are impulsive, they are erratic, they are excessive, they can be addictive, demanding, very me first, out of control, and they can be self-destructive. So impulsive suicide is something that could, for example, enter the picture. Sevens tend not to be the ones that are brooding in negative emotion. That's not something that stays with them. What happens instead is they become addictive, or they impulsively do things that are bad for them. But again, this is all, the psychology is working really hard to avoid negative emotions at that lower level. So that's what's going on there. And always just to focus back, that's the low side, but what we want is the high side, this focused, accomplished, really grateful person who uplifts everybody around them. That's what we're shooting for, especially with the type 7. So that is the overview.